You are here now, safe, unhurried, and gently held by the quiet of this moment. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to remember. Your breathing can slow on its own. The day has already loosened its grip. As you listen, you may notice how the room feels softer. Edges blur a little. Thoughts no longer need to line up. You are allowed to drift. You are allowed to rest. Tonight, we begin a story that was never meant to be rushed, a story that did not begin with noise or urgency or force. It began with stillness, with balance, with a quiet sense of order slowly finding its place. This is a story about creation, but not creation as an explosion or a command, creation as a settling, a gentle arranging of things, like dust falling into calm patterns after the air grows still. Long ago, before names felt fixed, before time was measured the way we measure it now, people looked at the sky and did not hurry to explain it. They watched. They waited. They noticed how morning arrived without being called, how night returned without argument. And in that waiting, something curious formed. The belief that the world did not rush either, that it unfolded when it was ready, that heaven and earth were not enemies, but parts of the same quiet rhythm. Here is the gentle paradox we will carry tonight. These early ideas were meant to last forever. They were shaped to explain everything. And yet, they lived softly. They changed without protest. They faded without being lost. You do not need to solve this paradox. You do not need to hold on to it. It can simply rest beside you, like a thought that is allowed to fall asleep too. As you listen, imagine a land not yet crowded with stories, wide valleys, slow rivers, mountains that seem more patient than tall, villages where evenings stretch long, and the most important sound is fire settling into ash. The people here live close to the ground. They wake with the light, not because they must, but because the day arrives gently. They work fields, repair tools, prepare meals that take time. Meals are shared slowly, bowls passed hand to hand, steam rising, then disappearing. Conversation pauses often. Silence is not empty here. It is useful. It gives space for thought to breathe. When night comes, they do not fight it with lamps or noise. They accept it as part of the order. Stars appear, not as decorations, but as reminders. Everything has a place. Everything takes its turn. Above them is heaven, not distant, not unreachable, simply higher, calmer, more refined. A place of balance rather than judgment, a mirror of the world below, but lighter, quieter. Below them is earth, solid, patient, dependable. Earth holds footprints. Earth remembers seasons. Earth does not rush answers. Between heaven and earth is where people live, not trapped, not elevated, simply positioned. Their role is not to conquer the order, but to move with it, to notice it, to respect its pace. In these early beliefs, creation did not happen once and then end. It continued quietly each day. When grain grew, when rain returned, when families gathered and separated without ceremony. Nothing here demands attention. That is what makes it powerful. The world is not trying to impress anyone. It simply continues. Sometimes, as generations pass, small questions begin to surface. Not loudly, not urgently, just small reflections shared during long evenings. Why does balance sometimes feel fragile? Why do seasons shift when nothing seems wrong? These questions are not fears. They are curiosities, gentle ones, the kind that do not need answers right away. Over time, stories begin to form, not as rules, but as companions, ways to sit beside the unknown without disturbing it, ways to explain order without controlling it. As you listen, you are not expected to remember names or details. You are not expected to follow a path. This story will carry itself. You can simply float alongside it. If your thoughts wander, that is perfectly fine. They are allowed to come and go. Nothing here requires your attention to continue. In the quiet of this first part, nothing is ending yet. Nothing is beginning sharply either. We are only settling into the rhythm, the slow unfolding, the first order finding its breath. And as this thought softens, as the images grow less defined, you may feel sleep drawing a little closer, not pulling, just waiting. You are safe here. The story will remain, even if you drift. You do not need to stay awake to hold it. Let that be enough for now. Let the quiet continue on its own. You are still here. Or perhaps you are only half here now. That is perfectly fine. The story does not need you to hold it tightly. It will move slowly on its own. Breathing becomes softer without effort. The body remembers how to rest. Muscles loosen in small, quiet ways. Nothing needs fixing. Nothing needs deciding. As you listen, heaven does not appear suddenly. It does not open with light or sound. It is already there, calm, balanced, unbothered by attention. In these early Chinese beliefs, heaven was not a ruler. It did not shout instructions downward. It did not demand obedience. Heaven was a pattern, a rhythm that stayed steady. People did not look up expecting answers. They looked up to remember order, to notice how things moved without being forced, how clouds drifted, how stars returned to familiar places. You can imagine them standing outside at night, not speaking much, hands resting at their sides, listening to insects, feeling the temperature settle. There is comfort in knowing that nothing above is rushing, that nothing is watching impatiently. Heaven is simply doing what it always does, holding balance, keeping time without counting it. Below, life continues in simple motions. Morning meals, tools lifted and set down, cloth folded carefully, water carried slowly. Work is not hurried here. It follows daylight. It pauses when bodies feel tired. There is trust that tomorrow will arrive. There is no need to steal time from the night. As seasons pass, people begin to notice something gentle. When life feels balanced, the world feels steady. When actions become careless, things seem to drift out of rhythm. This is not punishment. It is not reward. It is correspondence, a quiet reflection between heaven and earth, like a surface responding to a touch. Heaven does not correct mistakes. It does not intervene. It reflects. And people learn slowly, without being told, that harmony begins close to home. In shared meals, they speak of this softly, not as law, not as fear, but as observation. When we rush, things fray. When we move gently, things hold. You do not need to agree with them. You do not need to believe this. You are only listening, letting the thought pass by. As you listen, your own day feels far away. Edges soften, details lose importance. Only the rhythm remains. Children grow up hearing these ideas, not as lessons, as atmosphere. They learn balance the way one learns weather, by living inside it, by noticing when it changes. Heaven above remains quiet. Earth below remains patient. Between them, people adjust their steps. Not perfectly, not constantly, just enough. Sometimes imbalance appears. Crops fail. Rain comes late. Silence stretches longer than expected. No one panics. They wait. They observe. Waiting is not empty here. It is active in its own way. It allows space for correction, for small shifts in behavior, for gentler choices. This is the second quiet paradox. Nothing controls the world, yet everything influences it. Balance is fragile, but it does not break easily. You can let this idea drift beside you. You do not need to hold it. It does not need to stay. As night deepens, villages grow quieter. Fires dim. Conversations fade into breathing. Heaven continues above, unchanged. People sleep without asking if the world will still be there. They trust the order. They trust the rhythm. They trust that rest is part of balance too. As you listen now, your own rest becomes important. You are not expected to follow every word. You are allowed to drift away from meaning. If thoughts appear, let them pass like clouds. If images blur, let them blur further. Nothing here requires clarity. The idea of heaven softens. It becomes less a place, more a feeling. A sense that things can be steady without effort. And as this feeling fades gently into the background, as the rhythm slows even more, you may feel sleep drawing closer again. Not asking, just waiting. You are safe. The story will continue whether you listen or not. You do not need to stay awake to follow it. Let this part loosen its shape. Let the quiet carry you onward. You are still resting within the story now, or perhaps the story is resting around you. There is no difference here. Both are gentle. Both are allowed. Your breathing does not need guidance. It already knows the way. Slow, even, unconcerned with time. If the idea of heaven was light and quiet, earth was something different. Not heavier, not darker, just closer. Something that could be touched, something that carried memory. In early Chinese thought, earth was not passive, it was patient. It held traces of everything that passed over it. Footsteps, rain, seeds pressed gently into soil. People trusted the earth because it remembered what worked. Fields returned grain where grain had grown before. Paths formed where walking was repeated. Homes settled into places chosen carefully. Nothing was random here, not because it was controlled, but because it was remembered. Earth learned slowly, and people learned to listen. You can imagine the feeling of bare ground underfoot, cool in the morning, warm by afternoon, firm enough to stand on without thought. Work begins with light. Hands move through familiar motions, plowing, repairing, sweeping dust that will return tomorrow. There is no frustration in repetition. Repetition is reassurance. It tells the body that things are still working, that yesterday has not been lost. Meals arrive at expected times, not exact, but close enough. Bowls are filled. Food is shared without ceremony. No one eats alone unless they choose to. Earth provides without drama, not abundance, not scarcity, just enough. Enough becomes the ideal. When storms come, they are not signs of anger. They are reminders of movement. Change passes through and leaves again. Earth absorbs what it can. People adjust and continue. As you listen, you may feel how different this is from stories of struggle or conquest. Nothing here is trying to win. Nothing is trying to prove itself. Earth does not ask for belief. It asks for attention, for care that is quiet and steady, for respect that does not need words. Children learn this without being taught. They watch how elders treat tools, how broken things are repaired instead of discarded, how land is rested when it grows tired. The idea slowly forms that earth responds to care, not immediately, not dramatically, but over time, always over time. This becomes part of the first order. Heaven sets the rhythm. Earth keeps the memory. People move between them, adjusting gently. Sometimes the balance feels off. Fields yield less. Paths wash away. No one accuses the earth. They look instead at their own pace, their own attention. Correction is subtle. A field rested longer, water redirected carefully. Steps slowed just enough to notice. This is not discipline. It is alignment. A small turning back toward what works. As you listen, you may notice how comforting this feels. A world that does not demand perfection, only awareness, only patience. Earth does not forget easily. Even mistakes become lessons stored quietly beneath the surface. The ground remembers where floods reached, where structures failed, where balance was lost. And so people remember too, not as warnings, as understanding, a sense of where not to rush again. Evenings return gently. Work slows. Tools are set aside. Hands are washed. Dust settles where it belongs. Families gather without urgency. Stories are short. Silence is longer. The earth cools beneath them, holding the warmth of the day. You do not need to imagine this clearly. Blurry impressions are enough. The feeling matters more than the shape. If your thoughts drift, let them. Earth does not demand focus. It supports even wandering steps. In this part of the story, nothing ends. Nothing rises sharply either. The order is simply becoming familiar, settling into habit. Heaven remains steady above. Earth remains reliable below. Between them, life continues quietly. As this idea softens, as the sense of ground becomes less defined, you may feel your own body growing heavier, comfortably so. Supported, you are safe here. You do not need to carry the earth with you. It will remain whether you think of it or not. Let this thought loosen. Let the ground fade gently into rest. You are still drifting, still held gently inside the quiet. There is no need to adjust your position, no need to follow every word. The story understands how sleep works. Breath moves in, breath moves out, unnoticed, unmeasured, trusted, before names settled into language, before stories became organized. There was a sense of order that did not announce itself. It arrived the way breathing arrives, already happening before anyone paid attention. In early Chinese thought, order was not imposed. It was discovered, not invented by people, but recognized by them. People noticed that certain ways of living felt lighter, less strained, less noisy inside the body. Other ways felt heavy, crowded with effort. These feelings mattered. They were signals, not rules. Order did not belong to heaven alone. It did not belong to earth either. It moved between them, invisible, like wind through grass. You can imagine a morning where nothing unusual happens. The sun rises. Mist lifts slowly. Fields appear exactly where they were yesterday. People wake, stretch, and begin again. This repetition is not dull. It is grounding. It reassures the body that it knows where it is, that the world has not shifted overnight. Over time, people begin to speak about this feeling. Not loudly, not formally, just small observations exchanged while working. When things are like this, life feels smoother. When we move this way, less effort is wasted. These observations collect quietly. They do not become commandments. They become understanding. A shared sense of how to move without friction. Order, in this sense, is not control. It is alignment, like stepping into a rhythm that was already playing. You do not need to imagine charts or systems. There are none yet. Only habits, only attention, only the quiet noticing of cause and response. When people rise too early and work too late, fatigue lingers. When meals are rushed, conversation thins. When land is pushed too hard, it grows silent. None of this is framed as failure. It is framed as information. The world offering feedback without judgment. Children grow into this awareness naturally. They learn when to stop working by watching how elders pause. They learn when to speak by noticing when silence feels full. Order is absorbed rather than taught, like warmth from the sun. You do not explain it. You simply stand in it long enough. As generations pass, this understanding deepens. People begin to sense that heaven, earth, and human life are not separate layers. They are movements of the same pattern. Heaven expresses balance through cycles. Earth expresses balance through memory. People express balance through choice. Choice is not framed as power. It is framed as responsibility. Gentle responsibility. The kind that does not weigh heavily. You may feel how calm this idea is. A world where choice does not mean pressure. Only adjustment. Only listening. Order does not eliminate mistakes. Mistakes still happen, but they do not shatter the system. They bend it slightly, and the system slowly bends back. Nothing here collapses suddenly. Change arrives gradually, like shadows lengthening without announcement. Sometimes villages shift location, not because disaster struck, but because the land asked for rest. Homes are rebuilt patiently, paths are redrawn. Life continues without panic. This flexibility is part of order too, not rigidity, not permanence, but the ability to move without breaking. As you listen, you may notice how different this feels from stories built on conflict or urgency. There is no enemy here, no deadline, no final outcome being chased. Order exists to support life, not to test it. It allows people to sleep at night without fearing collapse by morning. Night, in particular, is respected, not filled unnecessarily, not resisted. Sleep is not seen as weakness. It is seen as maintenance, a return to balance. Families settle as darkness deepens. Lamps dim, voices lower. The body understands this transition before the mind does. As the night holds the village, heaven remains steady above. Earth remains firm below. Order moves between them unseen. You may feel how this mirrors your own moment now. The day has already loosened. You are not required to think clearly. You are allowed to let structure dissolve. Order does not disappear when you sleep. It continues without you. You do not need to monitor it. Over long stretches of time, these ideas slowly shape stories. Not myths yet, just ways of explaining why life feels better when lived gently. Words begin to form around patterns, balance, harmony, flow, but they remain soft words, not sharpened into doctrine. This is the first order, not strict, not loud, just present, supporting, patient. Nothing dramatic happens at its beginning. Nothing dramatic ends it either. It simply becomes familiar. So familiar that people forget it has a beginning at all. As you listen, you may feel the story thinning out, details loosening their grip, images becoming impressions rather than scenes. This is where sleep often deepens, where thought no longer needs direction, where listening becomes optional. You are safe letting go here. The order will hold whether you follow it or not. If your awareness fades, that is part of the rhythm too. Nothing is lost. Nothing is interrupted. Let the idea of order soften. Let it become a feeling rather than a concept, a sense that things can continue even when you rest. And as this feeling drifts further away, as the words grow quieter inside you, you may slip naturally into deeper sleep. Unnoticed, unforced, that is enough for now. The quiet knows where to go next. You are still being carried, not forward, not backward, just gently held in place. The story does not pull you along. It stays beside you. Breath moves quietly now, so quietly you may barely notice it. The body has already understood that this is a safe moment to rest. As the first order settled into daily life, balance stopped feeling like an idea. It became a way of living, something practiced without effort, like knowing when to stop walking because the body has reached home. People did not speak of balance often. They lived it, in the way they woke, in the way they worked, in the way they ended each day without hurry. Morning did not begin with urgency. It unfolded. Eyes opened slowly. Sounds arrived one by one. Light crept in through doorways and cloth. Tasks were chosen carefully. Not everything needed to be done at once. Some things could wait. Waiting was not failure. It was wisdom. Fields were tended with attention rather than force. Hands felt the soil before tools touched it. People learned to notice when land felt tired. Rest was given without argument. This was balance in practice. Not strict schedules, not rigid rules, just responsiveness. A quiet conversation between effort and rest. You can imagine how calming this feels. A life where nothing demands constant alertness, where mistakes are signals, not threats. As villages grew, this balance shaped how people lived together. Disagreements happened, but they were not allowed to spread endlessly. They were contained by patience, by pauses, by listening longer than speaking. There was an understanding that harmony did not mean sameness. It meant fit. Each person finding a place where their movement did not disturb the whole. Some people worked the land. Some repaired tools. Some cared for children or elders. No role was elevated too high. No role was pushed aside completely. Balance lived in proportion, in knowing when something had enough. Enough food, enough work, enough words. Silence held value here, not as emptiness, but as space. A place where thoughts could settle on their own. Even gatherings were shaped by this. Meals ended before exhaustion. Conversations softened naturally. No one stayed awake simply to prove endurance. As night arrived, the village dimmed gently. Not all at once. One light after another fading. Each household finding rest in its own rhythm. Sleep was not separated from life. It was part of it, a return to balance rather than an escape from effort. Children fell asleep, hearing calm voices nearby. Elders slept knowing they had done enough for one day. No one measured productivity. No one counted achievement. This way of living did not make life perfect. Illness came. Loss arrived quietly. Change was unavoidable, but balance softened these moments. It prevented collapse. Grief was allowed its time, not rushed, not hidden, but also not allowed to consume everything else. Life continued around it, gently. As you listen, you may notice how different this feels from modern urgency. Nothing here competes for attention. Nothing needs immediate resolution. Balance created patience. Patience created trust. Trust allowed people to rest without fear. Over long years, these habits became traditions, not formalized yet, just repeated because they worked, because they felt right inside the body. People began to sense that when balance was respected, the world felt quieter, weather felt less threatening, change felt manageable. This did not mean control. Storms still came, seasons still shifted, but fear did not dominate. Understanding replaced it. You do not need to imagine this clearly. Only feel the calm of it. A life paced slowly enough that sleep could arrive naturally each night. As the story continues, you may feel your own thoughts thinning. They no longer need direction. They drift in and out, like sounds heard through a window. Balance is already happening in you now. Your body choosing rest, your mind loosening its grip. No effort required. In these early beliefs, balance was not fragile. It was resilient. It bent instead of breaking. It returned even after disruption. This is why the first order lasted so long, not because it was enforced, but because it adapted. It allowed change without losing shape. As generations passed, people slowly forgot where these habits began. They simply knew that this was how life worked best. That rushing disturbed something important. That gentleness preserved it. This forgetting was not loss. It was success. The ideas no longer needed explanation. They had become instinct. As you listen now, you do not need to hold onto these ideas. They are not instructions. They are atmosphere. If sleep is near, you can let it arrive. The story does not require your attention to continue. Balance does not disappear when awareness fades. It remains underneath, supporting rest, supporting quiet. Let this part dissolve slowly, not ending, just loosening its edges. You are safe to drift further now. The rhythm knows the way. You are still resting inside the rhythm. Nothing has pushed you forward. Nothing has been left behind. The story continues the way breathing continues. Quietly. Time, in these early beliefs, was not something chased. It was something noticed. Something that moved in loops rather than lines. People did not imagine beginnings and endings sharply. They noticed returns. Morning returning after night. Warmth returning after cold. Seeds returning as plants, then seeds again. This made time feel gentle, predictable without being boring, reliable without being strict. You can imagine how comforting this felt. A sense that nothing truly vanished. It only changed shape, then found its way back. Days followed familiar patterns, not identical, but close enough to feel known. Work began when light arrived. It ended when the body felt ready. No one measured hours precisely. They measured readiness, hunger, fatigue, the angle of the sun. This way of living softened the mind. It reduced anticipation and regret. There was little focus on what had already passed or what might come far ahead. Attention stayed close to the present moment. As you listen now, you may feel something similar. Thoughts about earlier in the day or later tonight feel distant, less important. In early Chinese thought, time was part of order, not something outside it. Heaven expressed time through cycles. Earth expressed time through seasons. People expressed time through routine. Routine was not seen as limitation. It was seen as stability, a foundation that allowed the mind to rest. Children grew up expecting return, expecting that after absence came presence, after work came rest, after darkness came light. This expectation reduced fear. Even loss was understood differently, not erased, not denied, but placed within a wider movement. What left did not disappear entirely. It became part of what followed. This belief softened sorrow. It did not remove it, but it allowed grief to breathe, to move without becoming trapped. As seasons passed, people adjusted gently. Clothing changed. Meals shifted. Work slowed or intensified as needed. Nothing resisted these changes aggressively. They were expected. Time was not something to defeat. It was something to move with, like water following the shape of land. You do not need to understand this idea clearly. It is enough to feel its calm, a sense that nothing is running out right now. Nothing is late. Nothing is early. As night arrived, people did not think of it as an ending. It was a pause, a resting point in the circle. Sleep was simply another turn. Dreams were not analyzed, they were accepted. Another way the mind moved while the body rested. No urgency was attached to them. You may feel your own thoughts drifting now, less connected, more fluid. This is natural. Time feels different as sleep approaches. In this world, no one hurried children to grow. No one hurried elders to finish speaking. Time allowed space for each stage to exist fully. This created patience, a deep, quiet patience that did not feel forced. It simply existed because rushing felt unnecessary. As years passed, this understanding of time shaped stories. Creation itself was seen as ongoing, not a single moment, but a continuous unfolding. The world was always being made, each season adding something small, each generation adjusting slightly. Nothing needed to be final. You may notice how sleep-friendly this idea is. A world without sharp endings, without deadlines pressing against the mind. If you feel yourself drifting further, let it happen. The story does not require alertness. It flows whether you notice it or not. Time does not stop when you sleep. It simply softens its shape, becomes less demanding. And these beliefs, the present moment, held everything necessary. Past and future were already contained within it. There was nothing missing. As this idea settles, the sense of time grows hazy. Moments stretch and blur together. This is where rest deepens naturally. You are safe letting go of sequence now. Safe letting thoughts lose order. Nothing important will be missed. Let this part of the story fade gently, not closing, just circling onward without effort. The rhythm continues, and you can rest inside it. You are still drifting gently now. Awareness comes and goes without effort. The story remains whether you follow it or not. That is how it was always meant to be. In these early beliefs, heaven and earth were never separated by distance. They were connected through quiet relationship, a steady exchange that did not need words. Heaven offered pattern, earth offered substance. Neither tried to replace the other. They depended on balance instead. People sensed this connection without naming it. They felt it in changing weather, in soil responding to care, in days that unfolded smoothly when actions were gentle. This relationship was not dramatic. There were no signs to watch for, no warnings shouted from above, only subtle shifts that invited attention. You can imagine a farmer noticing that the land feels different this season. Not wrong, just quieter. Work adjusts without complaint. This adjustment is respect, not obedience. A willingness to listen instead of insist. In shared spaces, people spoke less about control and more about fit. How actions sat within the larger pattern. When something felt out of place, the response was not force. It was reflection. What moved too quickly? What asked for more rest? This way of thinking softened life. It reduced conflict before it grew loud. It allowed correction without blame. Children absorbed this simply by watching. They noticed when elders paused, when work stopped early, when silence was chosen over argument. No one explained heaven to them directly. They learned its presence indirectly, through rhythm, through repetition, through calm responses to change. Heaven was not above judging. It was above reflecting. Earth was not below suffering. It was below supporting. Between them, human life was not small. It was essential, the movement that allowed connection to remain active. You may feel how comforting this idea is. A place where people matter, without being burdened by responsibility, where presence is enough. As you listen, notice how your body feels supported, the chair or bed holding you, gravity doing its quiet work. Nothing needs to be held up by effort. This sense of support mirrors the belief itself. Earth holds, heaven steadies, life rests between them. Over time, people noticed that when this relationship was respected, life felt predictable in the best way. Not dull, reliable, safe. Uncertainty still existed, but it did not dominate thought. Change was part of the relationship too, expected, welcomed when it arrived gently. When change came abruptly, people slowed instead of panicking. They waited to see how heaven and earth responded. They adjusted after observing. This patience prevented many troubles from growing larger than they needed to be. Small shifts corrected quietly. Balance returned without announcement. As you listen now, you may feel the same patience spreading. Thoughts slow, urgency fades, the need to resolve anything disappears. In this worldview, nothing demanded immediate understanding. Some things revealed themselves only with time. Waiting was not ignorance. It was trust. Trust in the relationship itself. Trust that heaven and earth would continue, even if people rested for a while. Even sleep was seen as participation, a way of stepping back so the larger pattern could continue unobserved. Rest was cooperation, not absence. As night settled over villages, people did not fear what they could not see. Darkness was part of the exchange, a necessary quieting. You may feel your own awareness dimming now. This is not loss, it is alignment, your body following an old, familiar rhythm. Nothing in this story needs conclusion yet. It is not building toward urgency. It is widening slowly, becoming more spacious. If thoughts appear, let them pass without comment. They do not need answers. They are only moving through. The relationship between heaven and earth does not require attention to function. It continues, whether noticed or not. You are free to rest fully inside it, to let listening soften, to let sleep approach without resistance. As this part fades gently, as the sense of connection becomes less defined, you may drift further into rest, unaware of the transition. That is how it works best. Quietly, naturally, you are still here, or perhaps only partly listening now. Both are perfectly fine. The story does not need full attention. It moves gently either way. Breath remains slow and easy. The body has settled into its own rhythm. Thoughts arrive softly, then fade without needing permission. As balance and order became familiar, something else began to happen. People started to share small stories, not to explain everything, but to sit beside what could not be fully understood. These stories did not begin as myths. They were reflections, quiet attempts to describe patterns already felt, ways of speaking about heaven and earth without disturbing their calm. You can imagine evenings where work is done. Tools are set aside. Meals have ended. Someone speaks gently into the quiet, not performing, just remembering. The stories are simple. They do not demand belief. They describe how things came to be in the same tone one might describe weather, unforced, accepting. Creation is not told as a sudden moment. It is described as separation that happens slowly. Light finding its place, heavy things settling downward, space opening gently between them. People listen without urgency. No one interrupts to correct details. Accuracy is less important than feeling. The story only needs to fit the rhythm of life. Children listen with half attention. Elders listen with closed eyes. The story works either way. It is not meant to be held tightly. As these stories repeat, they change slightly, not from error, but from adaptation. Each teller shapes the words to match the moment. This flexibility keeps the stories alive. They do not harden into rules. They remain companions, soft frameworks for understanding that leave space for silence. Heaven in these stories is calm and distant, yet never absent. Earth is solid and generous, yet never demanding. People appear not as heroes, but as participants. This is important. The stories do not center power. They center relationship, how things fit together, rather than who controls whom. As you listen now, you may notice how soothing this feels. A world explained without tension, a creation without conflict, a beginning that does not rush. The stories are told slowly. Pauses are welcomed. Silence is allowed to stretch until someone is ready to speak again. In these pauses, meaning settles naturally. No one tries to capture it. It arrives when it wants to. Over time, certain images return often. Sky above, ground below, movement between. These images feel safe. They become familiar resting places for thought. The stories are not written yet. They live in voices, in memory, in repetitions softened by time. This keeps them gentle. Nothing becomes fixed too early. As generations pass, the stories grow richer, but not louder. They remain calm in tone. They do not seek attention. People do not argue over them. There is no need. They are not instructions. They are reminders of balance, of patience, of order that does not force itself. You do not need to remember these stories. You do not need to follow their details. Their purpose is not understanding. It is comfort. As you listen, you may feel your own memories drifting in. They can come. They can go. Nothing needs to be held. The act of storytelling itself becomes part of balance, a way of slowing the evening, of preparing the mind for rest. Stories mark the transition between activity and sleep. When voices grow quieter, the story naturally fades. No one forces an ending. It simply stops when silence feels right. This is how sleep often arrives too. Not announced, not demanded, just appearing when the body is ready. As this part of the story loosens, images soften, words become less distinct. The feeling remains. You are safe letting go here. The story does not need to continue clearly. It will wait where it is. If sleep comes now, let it. Nothing important will be missed. Balance continues without attention. Let this quiet storytelling dissolve into rest. Gently, naturally. You are still moving gently within the quiet now. Or perhaps the quiet is moving around you. There is no need to tell the difference. Both lead toward rest. Breath settles deeper, longer, more even. The body has stopped asking questions. It already knows this place. As stories continued to be shared, creation began to take a softer shape. Not a single moment, not a sudden act, but a gradual settling into form. In these early understandings, the world did not arrive fully finished. It assembled itself slowly, like mist lifting from water, like sediment finding its place. People imagined the beginning, not as chaos exploding outward, but as quiet heaviness separating from lightness. Clear things drifting upward, dense things settling downward. Heaven rose because it was light. Earth rested below because it was heavy. No struggle, no argument, just natural movement. Between them, space opened, not empty space, but living space. Room for wind, room for sound, room for breath. This was creation as accommodation. The world making room for itself. Each part finding where it could rest best. You may notice how calming this idea feels. A beginning without urgency, a structure without pressure, nothing forced into position. As people told these stories, they did not argue over details. Exactness did not matter. What mattered was the feeling of rightness, the sense that everything belonged where it was. Creation was not a command issued from above. It was a consequence of balance. When things were allowed to be what they were, order appeared naturally. Heaven became associated with clarity, with lightness, with movement that did not weigh down. Earth became associated with stability, with nourishment, with holding and remembering. Neither was superior. They were different roles in the same process, different expressions of the same beginning. People did not imagine themselves as separate from this creation. They were formed from it, shaped by the same movements, breathing the same air that filled the space between. This made life feel connected, not isolated. Each action was part of a larger motion, even if that motion was invisible. As you listen now, you may feel a similar connection. Your breath connected to the quiet, your body supported by what lies beneath it. Nothing floating alone. In these stories, creation did not end when the world took shape. It continued quietly, with every season, with every birth, with every small change that adjusted the whole. This made the world feel alive, without being unpredictable, alive in a steady way, alive without demanding attention. People lived inside this understanding. They did not feel watched. They did not feel tested. They felt included. When something changed unexpectedly, they did not assume failure. They assumed continuation. Creation still unfolding, finding a new balance. This softened fear. It replaced panic with patience. Waiting became a form of trust. You do not need to remember these ideas. They are not meant to be stored. They are meant to be felt, then allowed to drift away. As the stories deepened, certain images returned again and again. A vast quiet before form, a slow separation, a steady settling into order. These images soothed rather than startled. Creation became something one could rest inside, not something to solve, not something to fear. Even children sensed this calm. They did not imagine a violent beginning. They imagined a gentle one, something closer to sleep than to noise. As you listen now, you may notice how naturally this fits with the way your own body enters rest. No sharp transition, just gradual softening. In the evenings, when stories reached this part, voices often grew quieter, words spaced farther apart. Listeners drifted without apology. No one demanded attention. No one worried about endings. The story did not need completion. It had already done its work. Creation, in this sense, was not about beginnings alone. It was about permission. Permission for things to exist as they were. Permission for rest. This permission extended to sleep itself. Rest was not absence. It was participation, a way of aligning with the deeper rhythm. You may feel that rhythm now, slower than thought, wider than awareness, carrying everything without effort. If your mind drifts away completely, that is allowed. Creation does not require witnesses. It continues quietly regardless. In these beliefs, the most powerful forces were the quietest, the ones that did not announce themselves, the ones that worked steadily in the background. Balance, time, space, rest. As this part of the story stretches and thins, words may become less distinct, images less formed. That is a sign of deepening rest. You are safe here. Nothing will be missed if you let go. The story does not end. It simply continues beyond attention. Let the idea of creation soften further. Let it dissolve into feeling. A sense that everything has found its place, including you. As this thought fades, as awareness loosens its hold, sleep may arrive without announcement. That is exactly how it should be. The quiet remains, and you can rest inside it. You are still resting within the quiet now, listening without effort, or resting without listening at all. Both belong here. Breath continues in its own slow way. No one is counting it. No one needs to guide it. The body understands what to do. As the stories of creation softened and spread, something subtle began to change in how people spoke about heaven. Not its position, not its calm, but its relationship. Heaven was no longer only the pattern above. It became something that responded, not with words, not with commands, but with reflection. People noticed that when life felt harmonious, the world felt open, skies seemed clearer, seasons steadier, not perfect, but easier to move within. When life felt strained, the world felt quieter in a different way. Not angry, not hostile, just less responsive, as if waiting for something to soften. This did not make heaven into a judge. It made it into a listener, a presence that echoed what was offered to it. You can imagine how gently this idea settled. No fear attached to it, no urgency, just awareness. People began to speak of alignment more often, not obedience, not submission. Alignment as listening carefully to how actions felt, how choices echoed outward. When actions were rushed, the echo felt sharp. When actions were gentle, the echo softened. This was not punishment, it was correspondence. Heaven, in this sense, did not interfere. It reflected, like a still surface showing what moved above it. Earth did the same in its own way, responding slowly, remembering patiently, holding what was placed upon it. Between them, people lived with increasing attentiveness, not anxious attentiveness, comfortable attentiveness, the kind that does not strain the mind. You may notice how this mirrors your own state now, listening without effort, noticing without analysis, awareness present but unforced. As this idea spread, stories adjusted to include it. Heaven was no longer distant and silent. It was quiet and receptive, always there, always steady, always responding in subtle ways. People did not ask heaven for favors. They did not plead. They adjusted themselves instead. believing that harmony began inward. This removed fear from the relationship. There was nothing to bargain with, nothing to appease, only balance to restore when it drifted. Rest became part of this alignment. Exhaustion was seen as a sign, not of weakness, but of imbalance, a signal to pause. Work was adjusted accordingly, not to achieve more, but to preserve steadiness. Life did not need constant expansion. It needed continuity. You may feel how different this is from worlds built on urgency. Here, nothing pushes. Nothing accelerates unnecessarily. Heaven listening did not mean heaven changed. It meant people became quieter, more attentive to the feedback already present. Silence gained new importance, not empty silence, listening silence, the kind that allows patterns to be felt rather than named. In the evenings, this silence often stretched long. Stories slowed, voices softened, words spaced farther apart. Listeners drifted in and out of attention. No one minded. The story did not demand completion. It offered companionship. As you listen now, you may feel the same permission to drift, to fade, to rest without concern. In these beliefs, heaven listening was not about approval. It was about relationship, a shared rhythm that remained steady as long as no one tried to force it. This idea reduced conflict quietly. When things felt wrong, people looked first at pace, at excess, at imbalance. Correction was inward, gentle, often invisible to others. And because of this, balance returned without drama. You do not need to remember any of this. The details are unimportant. The feeling is enough, a sense of being met without judgment. As the night deepened in villages, heaven continued above, unchanged, listening without effort. Earth continued below, holding without complaint. People slept without fear of oversight. Rest was not watched, it was trusted. You may feel how comforting this trust is. A world that does not monitor rest. A rhythm that continues whether you participate or not. As this part of the story thins, words may lose shape. Meaning may dissolve into tone. That is expected. The idea of heaven listening softens into a feeling of being held, not observed, not evaluated, just included. If sleep approaches now, you do not need to resist it. Listening can continue without awareness. Let this thought loosen. Let the story carry itself forward quietly. You are safe to drift deeper. The rhythm does not require you. You are still here, resting in the soft space between listening and sleep. There is no need to decide where you are. The story does not ask for clarity. It welcomes softness instead. Breathing is slower now, not controlled, not guided, simply happening in its own gentle rhythm. The body already trusts this moment. As ideas of heaven and earth matured, as stories settled into familiar shapes, harmony began to move inward. It was no longer only something observed in the world. It became something felt inside. People started to notice that balance was not only about seasons or land. It lived within the body as well. in breath, in posture, in the quiet sense of ease or tension that followed choices. This realization did not arrive suddenly. It surfaced gradually, through experience rather than explanation, through noticing rather than teaching. When people lived gently, their bodies felt lighter. Sleep came more easily. Thoughts did not crowd the night. These were signs, not rewards. When life became hurried, the body responded differently. Rest felt shallow, breath shortened, attention scattered. These were not punishments, they were signals. Harmony, then, was understood as something internal as well as external, a state that could be felt, adjusted, returned to. You may notice this awareness now, how the body responds when it is allowed to rest, how effort fades without instruction. This is harmony making itself known quietly. People did not seek harmony aggressively. They did not chase calm. They simply removed what disrupted it. Excess work, unnecessary noise, endless repetition of worry. Life slowed naturally as a result, not because time changed, but because attention did. Moments felt wider, evenings felt longer, sleep felt deeper. As harmony moved inward, judgment softened. People were less concerned with comparing lives. Each person's rhythm was seen as unique. What brought balance to one might not suit another. This understanding reduced tension quietly. There was less need to correct others, more patience with difference, more allowance for variation. Harmony did not demand sameness. It allowed fit, each life finding its own place within the larger pattern. In families, this showed in gentler expectations. Children were allowed to grow slowly. Elders were allowed to rest without explanation. No one was rushed toward a role. Harmony inside the body also changed how people listened. Listening became less about response and more about presence. Silence between words was valued. This kind of listening carried into sleep. The mind learned how to stop insisting, how to release unfinished thoughts without anxiety. You may feel that now. Thoughts loosening their grip, not needing resolution, not needing completion. As these ideas spread, harmony was no longer described only in stories. It was described in feelings, ease, settling, a sense of being where one belonged. People spoke less about heaven's response and more about inner alignment. If something felt strained inside, that was enough reason to pause. No external sign was required. This inward awareness did not isolate people. It connected them more deeply, because harmony inside allowed harmony between. Conversations softened, conflicts shortened, resolutions arrived quietly. You do not need to imagine these scenes clearly. They are not meant to be sharp, only impressions, a tone, a feeling of ease spreading outward. As night settled, people noticed how harmony affected rest. Those who lived gently slept deeply. Those who pushed against rhythm found sleep thinner, less complete. Sleep became a teacher, not in words, but in sensation. Restfulness or restlessness, reflecting the day that came before. This did not create fear of sleeplessness. It created curiosity. What had been too much? What could be softened tomorrow? You may feel how kind this approach is. No blame, no urgency, only adjustment. Harmony inside did not mean perfection. Mistakes still happened. Imbalance still returned at times. But correction became gentler, quicker, less dramatic. People trusted that harmony could be found again because they had felt it before. It was familiar, like returning home after wandering briefly. As you listen now, you may sense that familiarity too. A feeling that rest is natural, that nothing is required of you in this moment. This is harmony becoming present, not something to achieve, something to allow. The stories at this stage became quieter still, less about describing the world, more about reflecting the listener's state. They slowed the evening, prepared the body for sleep. Words grew softer, pauses lengthened, listeners drifted without apology. The story fulfilled its purpose before it finished speaking. As this part of the story fades, awareness may thin further. The line between listening and sleeping may blur completely. That is welcome. Harmony does not require attention to remain. It continues beneath thought, beneath words, beneath listening itself. You are safe letting go now. The quiet will remain. The rhythm will continue. Let this part dissolve gently. No ending needed. Only rest. You are still resting now. Listening has become lighter, almost optional. The story understands this. It slows to match you. Breath moves softly through the body, unnoticed, uninterrupted. There is nothing you need to hold on to, nothing you need to follow carefully. As harmony settled deeper within people, something else began to happen quietly. Order no longer needed to be explained. It no longer needed stories to support it. It lived on its own. What was once spoken became something felt, something carried without thought, like knowing when to rest without checking the time. People still told stories, but less often, not because they were forgotten, but because they were understood. The stories had done their work. Order lived in habits now, in the way mornings unfolded without rush, in the way evenings softened naturally, in the way silence was welcomed rather than filled. No one announced balance. No one declared harmony. It revealed itself quietly, through ease, through steadiness, through the absence of strain. You may notice how familiar this feels, how your own body recognizes this state without explanation. Rest does not need instruction. It arrives when conditions are gentle enough. As words became less important, listening itself changed. People listened more to sensation, then to explanation, to the body's signals, to the feeling of fit or misfit. When something felt heavy, they paused. When something felt light, they continued. This was enough guidance. Heaven, earth, and human life no longer needed to be separated in thought. They were experienced as one movement, different expressions of the same rhythm. This did not make life smaller. It made it quieter, and in that quiet, life felt fuller, more complete. You may feel this fullness now, not excitement, not intensity, just enoughness. Nothing missing, nothing pressing. As generations passed, people stopped asking where order came from. The question no longer felt important. Order simply was, like breathing, like gravity, like sleep. This did not erase curiosity, it softened it. Questions became gentle companions, not urgent demands. Wonder existed without tension. In the evenings, people still gathered sometimes, not always to tell stories, sometimes just to sit together, listening to fire, listening to wind, listening to nothing at all. Silence became shared rather than empty, a sign that no explanation was needed. That being present was enough. Children grew up inside this silence. They learned that not every moment required words. That rest was not boredom. That quiet was not absence. Elders rested without guilt. Their value no longer measured by output. Their presence alone was contribution enough. This way of living reduced urgency. Life did not feel like a problem to solve. It felt like something to accompany, day by day, season by season. As you listen now, you may notice that words are becoming less important. Tone carries more than meaning. Pauses carry more than sentences. This is where sleep often deepens, where the mind stops trying to organize, where awareness loosens its edges. Order does not disappear here. It becomes background, supportive, unnoticed, like the ground beneath you. And these beliefs, the most stable systems, were the ones that did not demand attention. They held quietly. They adapted gently. They allowed rest. Creation itself was now understood as something ongoing but subtle, not dramatic, not disruptive, just continuous adjustment. People trusted this process. They did not watch it closely. They lived inside it. You may feel that trust now, a sense that you do not need to stay alert, that nothing will be lost if you sleep. As night deepened, villages grew still. Lights dimmed. Voices disappeared. Order remained, unchanged, unconcerned. Sleep arrived without ceremony, without announcement. People drifted when they were ready. No one stayed awake out of obligation. You are allowed the same permission to rest without explanation, to drift without tracking time. Words now begin to thin further. They slow, they stretch, they leave space between them. If your awareness fades here, that is natural. The story no longer needs language to continue. It has already settled where it belongs. Let this part loosen gently, not ending, just quieting further. You are safe to let go. The rhythm continues without effort. You are very close to sleep now, perhaps already drifting in and out, listening only in fragments. That is exactly how this part is meant to arrive. Breath moves slowly, almost unnoticed. The body no longer waits for instruction. It has entered its own quiet intelligence. In these later understandings, Rest was no longer seen as a pause between actions. It became part of the order itself, as essential as movement, as natural as change. People came to understand that nothing remained balanced without periods of stillness. Fields rested, tools rested, voices rested, and so did minds. Rest was not earned. It was not scheduled as reward. It was assumed, built into the rhythm of living. You can imagine how different this felt. A world where exhaustion was not admired, where staying awake too long was not seen as strength, where listening to the body was considered wisdom. As this understanding spread, life softened further. Work ended earlier when needed. Silence was chosen more often. Even ambition learned to slow. Rest was not empty time, it was fertile time. The space where balance returned on its own, where tension unwound without being analyzed. You may feel that now. Muscles releasing without effort, thoughts no longer lining up, awareness spreading thin and wide. People noticed that after true rest, life resumed more smoothly. Decisions felt easier. Actions felt lighter. Nothing needed to be forced back into motion. This confirmed something deeply important. That rest was not interruption. It was restoration. A quiet resetting of the inner order. Stories changed again because of this. They became shorter, less detailed, sometimes only a few lines, before silence took over completely. Listeners did not feel cheated. They felt complete. The story had already done its work. Words were no longer necessary. Sleep itself was understood as a return to origin, not to nothingness, but to the deeper rhythm beneath thought. The same rhythm that shaped heaven and earth. This made sleep feel safe, familiar, not a loss of control, but a release into support. You may feel that safety now, the sense that you are held, even as awareness loosens. Nothing falling away, nothing at risk. As rest became honored, life gained resilience. People recovered more fully. Imbalance corrected itself faster. The system stayed gentle because it stayed rested. This was the quiet strength of the first order, not endurance, not dominance, but renewal. Again and again. In the evenings, people prepared for sleep without urgency. There was no fear of missing something important. Nothing essential happened without rest. Darkness was welcomed, not filled unnecessarily. Lights dimmed, sounds softened. The world cooperated with sleep. You are experiencing that cooperation now. The story slowing, the words spacing farther apart, meaning dissolving into tone. Rest does not need to be understood. To work, it simply needs permission. You have already given it. As this part continues, it does not aim toward a conclusion. It opens space instead, wide enough for sleep to settle fully. Thoughts may appear briefly. They do not need answers. They can pass through like soft echoes. The idea of order fades further now, not disappearing, just becoming background, like a hum that remains even when unheard. Heaven does not watch. Earth does not demand. The rhythm continues without attention. You do not need to stay with the story. It will remain whether you are awake or not. Nothing depends on your awareness. If sleep deepens here, let it. That is the final alignment. Rest completing the cycle. The body understands what to do next. The mind can follow or not. Either way is fine. Let this part dissolve into quiet, not ending, just opening further. You are safe to sleep now. The order is holding everything. You are resting very deeply now. Listening may feel distant, almost like sound heard through water. That is exactly where this final part belongs. Breath moves on its own, slow, unmeasured. The body no longer waits for guidance. It has returned to something older than thought. At the end of these understandings, nothing new needed to be added. Nothing needed to be explained further. The order had completed its quiet circle. Not by closing, but by settling, heaven remained above. Not watching, not judging, simply continuing its calm movement. Patterns repeating without effort, cycles holding steady. Earth remained below, holding, remembering, supporting everything placed upon it, without complaint or demand. Between them, life continued gently, not striving to define itself, not trying to reach upward or dig downward, simply existing where it fit best. People no longer felt the need to describe creation. They lived inside it. Every breath was proof enough. Every return of morning, every arrival of sleep. The stories that once explained the world now rested quietly in memory. They were no longer needed each night. Their purpose had been fulfilled. They had guided people back to rhythm. In this final understanding, nothing was missing. Nothing was unfinished. Life was not waiting for improvement. It was allowed to be as it was. This allowance was the deepest form of balance. Not control, not correction, but acceptance without indifference. Care without urgency. You may feel this acceptance now. A sense that nothing needs to be fixed. That rest itself is enough. That awareness can soften completely. Silence here is not empty. It is full, full of continuity, full of support, full of quiet movement beneath stillness. Even the idea of order becomes unnecessary now, because nothing is resisting anything else. Everything has settled into place naturally. People slept easily in this world, not because life was perfect, but because it was gentle, because rest was trusted, because waking did not feel threatening. Dreams came and went without analysis. Sleep passed without being monitored. Morning arrived when it arrived. No one worried about missing anything essential. This was the final harmony, not something achieved, but something released into. Letting go of effort, letting go of explanation, letting go of attention itself. You may notice now that listening has become very faint. Words are only impressions. Tone remains, but even that begins to dissolve. This is where the story was always leading, not toward an ending, but toward silence that feels safe. silence that holds without collapsing. Nothing follows this part because nothing needs to. The rhythm continues on its own. The cycle does not require narration. If awareness fades completely, that is not absence. It is participation, the deepest kind. Heaven does not need acknowledgement. Earth does not need gratitude. They continue whether named or not. And so do you. Your body is supported. Your breath is steady. Your mind is free to rest. Nothing is expected of you now. There is no closing thought to remember, no final image to hold. Only quiet, only rest, only continuation without effort. If sleep takes you fully here, that is exactly right. The story has already done its work. It does not need witnesses. Let everything soften. Let everything settle.